You know how sometimes you really want to get your head around something complex, like really understand it, but without wading through weeks of research?
Hmm.
Well, today we're kind of offering that shortcut for a topic that's just exploded in global interest lately. I mean, ayahuasca.
Yeah, it really has. You see it popping up everywhere now, far beyond those sort of niche circles it used to be confined to.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've gone through our sources, including a really interesting documentary transcript to pull out the essentials for you.
Right. The aim is to give you a solid handle on what ayahuasca is about, covering the key aspects, a clear overview without you needing to do all the legwork.
Yeah, so we're going to unpack what it actually is, this traditional medicine,
Yeah.
and who traditionally makes it. Then look at the potential upsides, but also, critically, the risks.
The pros and cons, basically.
Right. And we'll touch on the spiritual side, which is huge for many people, and also what science is starting to say. And
Definitely.
you're here to help connect those dots, give us that broader context.
Happy to.
Okay, let's dive in then. First things first. What is ayahuasca?
Okay, so at its heart, ayahuasca is a traditional plant medicine. Comes from the Amazon rainforest.
Plant medicine.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is how holistically it's applied. Traditionally, it wasn't just for like one specific symptom. It was used to address a whole spectrum psychological stuff, physical, emotional, spiritual issues.
Ah, so looking at the whole person, not just isolating one problem.
Exactly, that's the idea. It often gets described as an opener or maybe a potentiate,
An opener, meaning,
meaning it can sort of unlock things, bring issues that are maybe buried deep down,
like,
stuff you're not consciously dealing with, bring it up to the surface.
okay.
And the idea is once it's surfaced, you have a chance to actually confront it, process it, maybe even resolve it, like shining a light on hidden things so you can work with them.
So it's not just about the immediate experience, but what comes after, addressing root causes.
That's a really key distinction, yeah. And it's so important to remember, this isn't some new wellness fad. Ayahuasca has this incredibly deep cultural history in the Amazon. We're talking potentially thousands of years.
Wow, thousands. That really puts it in perspective.
It does. It's embedded in tradition.
Okay, so if someone listening is curious, maybe thinking about this,
Yeah.
what's the absolute first thing they need to get?
Preparation. The sources hammer this home. Preparation, proper training, and crucially, experienced guidance. And a huge part of that preparation, intention.
Intention.
Yeah, really digging into why you're considering it. What are you hoping to explore? What needs addressing? It has to be deliberate. It's not casual.
Right, definitely not something to just like stumble into.
No. And another vital point working with ayahuasca is seen as a process. It's not a magic bullet, not a one-time fix.
Yeah.
The benefits, if they come, often unfold over time, maybe through several ceremonies, and definitely through integrating those experiences back into your everyday life afterwards. That's crucial.
Integration.
Yeah.
We'll probably come back to that. So it's a journey. Extends way beyond just the ceremony itself.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the people at the heart of this tradition. Who actually makes ayahuasca?
So traditionally, it's prepared and also administered by Amazonian curanderos. You might hear them called shamans sometimes.
Curanderos.
And these aren't just folks who picked it up recently. We're talking incredibly rigorous training, often 6, 8 years, sometimes even longer.
6 to 8 years.
Yeah, and frequently this knowledge is passed down through families, generation after generation. It might start when they're quite young. The sources mention the Cordero family, for instance, where there's a third-generation curandero carrying on the practice.
That's a lifetime commitment almost.
It really is. And through that training, they develop this incredibly deep, nuanced understanding, not just of the ayahuasca vine itself, but all the companion plants often used with it.
Right, it's not just one thing.
No, it's a complex brew. They have this sophisticated knowledge of the local plants and what they do. It's an art, really, and a science passed down.
A whole botanical science.
You could say that. And the sources also point out that in the traditional setting, the whole process is usually transparent,
Transparent how?
like from finding the plants in the jungle, sourcing them, to the actual cooking. Those taking part often see it happening. They know where the medicine comes from, how it's made.
Oh, I can see how that would build trust. A real connection to the process.
Definitely. Now, obviously, ayahuasca use has spread way beyond the Amazon.
Right.
The sources acknowledge that global increase in use, but they don't really detail who might be preparing it in, say, Europe or North America, outside that traditional context. The emphasis really stays on the depth of knowledge held by the experienced, traditionally trained curanderos.
Okay, understood. So let's shift to why. Why are people increasingly drawn to this? What are the potential upsides, the pros?
Well, a huge factor mentioned is the potential for healing. The sources suggest it might help with a whole range of conditions, sometimes ones that, Western medicine struggles with or doesn't fully address.
Like what specifically?
Depression comes up a lot. The claim is that ayahuasca might work on it biochemically, physiologically, and psychologically, all three levels,
Huh.
offering maybe a more lasting relief by getting at those interconnected roots. For instance, maybe it helps process old trauma emotionally, which could then shift brain chemistry and how you feel overall.
That does sound like a fundamentally different way of looking at mental health compared to just managing symptoms day to day.
It does seem to be, yeah. The sources also mention reported benefits for anxiety, different phobias, irrational fears, stress, and trauma, like PTSD. There are some powerful personal stories in the documentary transcript about healing from trauma.
Okay. And beyond those kinds of mental health challenges,
Right.
any other areas?
Yeah, there are also anecdotal reports, so people's experiences of improvement in symptoms for some neurophysiological conditions, things like Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis.
Really? Symptom improvement?
Yeah, the source material frames it as symptomatic improvement. But I mean,
Mm.
even reducing tremors or gaining a bit more mobility, that can be huge for quality of life, can't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Life-changing, potentially. What about for people who don't have a specific illness but are maybe seeking, I don't know, personal growth?
That's another major area highlighted. Ayahuasca is described as being potent for personal autoanalysis,
Oh.
self-discovery.
Autoanalysis.
Yeah, like it can bring unconscious stuff patterns, unresolved issues into your conscious mind, gives you a chance to really look at them, understand them.
Okay.
And then there's the spiritual dimension. Many users report profound spiritual awakenings, a feeling of connection to something much bigger than themselves, major shifts in perspective on life. The sources have these anecdotes. People describing experiencing infinite love or a connection to a great spirit. That kind of experience can be incredibly transformative, obviously.
Yeah, I can imagine feeling that interconnectedness would completely change how you see things.
It seems to often do that. The sources also talk about purging.
Purging, like throwing up.
That can be part of it, yeah, physical purging. But it can also be emotional, like intense crying, releasing held emotions, or energetic. It's seen as a kind of cleansing, a release of negativity, toxins, things that are holding you back.
Okay.
And often, this purging is considered a necessary first step, like clearing the decks before the deeper insights can come through.
So the process itself involves letting go, sometimes quite physically or emotionally. Intense.
That seems to be the understanding, yes. And moving on from that, the experience can also lead people to question old beliefs, maybe develop more authentic goals for their lives.
Mhm.
And there's often this reported increase in empathy, feeling connected to others. The group setting of ceremonies can foster a real sense of like brotherhood or sisterhood.
Community?
Exactly. And finally, it's suggested ayahuasca can help break negative cycles, patterns of behavior that just aren't working.
Okay, so it really paints a picture of potential positive change across the board, mental, emotional, spiritual, behavioral.
That's the potential described, yes.
But there has to be a flip side. With something this powerful, what are the cons, the risks?
Absolutely critical to discuss.
Yeah.
And the source material is very clear. Ayahuasca experiences are not always nice, not always easy.
Right.
They can be incredibly challenging, really difficult, emotionally intense, sometimes downright scary as all that suppressed stuff comes bubbling up.
Right.
The documentary transcript has people describing their experiences as grueling.
Grueling. Okay, so not the blissful visionary trip some might imagine then.
Not necessarily, no, not at all. And that reality just highlights again how vital the setting and guidance are. Proper preparation, a safe space, experienced facilitators. They're essential for helping navigate those tough moments, the unexpected difficulties.
Makes sense. What about expectations? Could going in expecting a magic fix be a risk?
Definitely. The transcript specifically warns against that idea that just drinking the brew will solve everything. It emphasizes that real, lasting change needs intention, yes, but also a genuine desire to change, and then hard work, integration work afterwards.
Ah, the integration again.
Yes. The ceremony is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. The real work often starts when you get home.
Okay.
Another point raises vulnerability. The altered state ayahuasca induces can make people more suggestible, almost like a light hypnosis.
Oh, interesting.
Which means you need to be really careful about who is facilitating, what are their intentions, are they competent? There's a definite risk mentioned of encountering people who lack integrity or the skills to handle psychological issues that might come up.
That's quite sobering. You're putting immense trust in the guide.
You really are. And then there's the risk of misinterpreting the experiences. They can be very symbolic, very abstract. Without good support for integration, you might misunderstand what came up.
Right.
And integration itself, as we keep saying, can be tough. It takes conscious effort, maybe lifestyle changes. It can take months, even years, to fully process and weave the insights into your life. The sources mention people struggling when they got back home, trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, I can see that being a challenge.
And one last point, maybe more systemic, the rising global demand raises sustainability questions. Are the plants being overharvested? We need to think about cultivation, responsible practices for the future.
Those are all incredibly important considerations for anyone exploring this. Okay, let's pivot slightly to the spiritual side, which you've touched on, but it seems so central.
It really does. The sources emphasize how common it is for people to report spiritual awakenings, or at least a heightened sense of spiritual awareness. And interestingly, this happens regardless of their background, whether they were religious or spiritual before or not.
So it can kind of open that door for anyone.
That's what's suggested. Many people describe this profound sense of connecting to something bigger,
Yeah.
something beyond their individual self. They use terms like great spirit, universal consciousness, infinite love.
Wow.
Yeah. And the documentary touches on shamanic ideas, suggesting that ayahuasca, used properly, can foster a direct connection. No need for intermediaries, no hierarchy, just you and the numinous, maybe,
It's a direct line.
leading to these powerful moments of feeling like you're merging, like the boundaries between you and everything else just dissolve for a bit. The whole experience is often talked about as an inner journey.
Guided by the medicine.
Exactly. Guided by the medicine, revealing deeper truths about yourself, about reality. And the lessons learned are often deeply personal, unexpected things around forgiveness, maybe self-love, understanding your path.
Sounds like a very intimate, potentially life-altering exploration.
It can be described that way, yes.
Now, what about the science? Our sources mentioned a scientific perspective, too. What did they say there?
Well, the documentary transcript brings up that the effects, say on depression, are thought to happen on multiple levels, biochemically maybe affecting neurotransmitters, physiologically how the body functions, and psychologically thought patterns, emotional processing.
So acknowledging biological factors are involved.
Yes, that's the indication. And it also reiterates those anecdotal reports about symptom improvements in Parkinson's or MS. But again, important to stress, those are observations, individual accounts, not rigorous study results presented in the source.
Gotcha. Anecdotal, but still noteworthy.
The overall perspective shared in the source material is this idea of science catching up a bit.
Catching up.
Yeah, like science is starting to look at and maybe validate what traditional knowledge systems have understood about these plants for a long time, suggesting these medicines might hold real potential for conditions that, conventional medicine finds really challenging.
That intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science is fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
Did the source material get into specifics? Like naming particular studies or detailing methods?
Not really, no. It
Okay.
mentions the potential, it mentions the scientific interest, but it doesn't dive into specific study details or findings. So our focus is more on that mention of science getting involved rather than concrete research results from this particular source.
Understood. Okay, so if we were to wrap up this deep dive, based on this material, what are the absolute key takeaways for you?
Well, first, ayahuasca is a traditional Amazonian medicine with incredibly deep roots, not a fad.
Right.
Second, it's reported to have significant potential for holistic healing mind, body, spirit, and for profound spiritual growth and self-discovery. Third, and this is huge, approaching it requires serious preparation, intention, experienced guidance, and realistic expectations. It's not a magic pill.
Crucial point.
Fourth, integration is key. The work continues long after the ceremony. And fifth, there are real risks and challenges, difficult experiences, vulnerability, potential for misuse, integration difficulties, sustainability issues that need careful, informed consideration. And finally, science is starting to get interested, hinting at this potential bridge between traditional knowledge and modern understanding.
That's a really clear summary. It leaves us, and you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, perhaps. Given everything we've discussed, the potential benefits, the deep spiritual possibilities, but also the very real challenges and risks, what does this growing global fascination with traditional plant medicines like ayahuasca actually tell us about where we are right now? Does it suggest something about our current approaches to health, to well-being, maybe even our understanding of consciousness itself. It certainly makes you think about that interplay, doesn't it? Between the spiritual, the psychological, and the physical parts of ourselves.